Today we are kicking off a new sermon series. I want to begin first and foremost with some good news. Perhaps the best news you're going to hear all day. It's actually a quote from somebody quoting somebody else, but you ready for it? Today is the day of salvation. That's it. That's the best news you're going to hear. Today is the day of salvation. If you hear his voice today, do not harden your heart, for today is the day of salvation. If you've questioned these things about salvation, if you've sought out what this salvation means, if you are hesitant or resistant to this idea of salvation, if you are kind of interested in the salvation message, or frankly, if you just know I am not one of those saved people, today's the day of salvation. You're in the right place at the right time, and we are glad you are here this morning. We all have a tendency to take people's word for things as it relates to Jesus and the gospel. In fact, many of us here for years just took everyone else's word for it before we actually had an encounter with Jesus. Yesterday morning, my family had plans to go out. And, well, you know what the weather was like. It was terrible. I had left early in the morning to go run some errands and got back home, and I'm telling my wife, baby, it's raining, it's cold. And she pulled out her phone. She's like, no, my app says 0% chance of rain. We even checked the weather, man. It said high of 73. I'm like, it's nowhere near 73 degrees. And, sweetheart, you can open the door. It's raining. It's raining outside. It doesn't matter what your app says. You can't just take their word for it when you can open the door yourself and see for yourself. Why is that? That's because weather, thank you, is a real thing. And so it is with Jesus. You don't have to just take somebody's word for it. You don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to take what they said on Facebook about him, or what they said on YouTube about him, or what they said on CNN about him, what they said on wherever. It don't matter what your app says about Jesus. You can encounter Jesus for yourself. You can open the door. In fact, the scripture says he's actually knocking. He's knocking at your door. You can open the door, and Jesus said anybody that opens that door is going to find out. If anyone opens the door, he says, I'll come in and we'll talk. We'll talk. I encourage you to do that. This series is called Just in Case. Just in Case. And it's going to focus on a few characters in the scriptures who were hesitant and resistant to Jesus. And they all had this one common thread, which is the premise, the thesis statement of this whole series. I'm going to put it up on the screen here. Ready? People instinctively resist the gospel of Jesus, not because they believe it's false, but because they're afraid it's true. People instinctively resist the gospel of Jesus, not because they believe it's false, but because they're afraid it's true. The first character we're going to look at for this message today is a troubled man named Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate is well known. If you grew up in Sunday school, you know Pilate. He's kind of the bad guy, right? Kind of. Well, we're going to take a closer look at Pilate and the things that he went through as he processed this encounter with Jesus. Now, you can read about Pontius Pilate in Matthew chapter 27, in Mark chapter 15, in Luke chapter 23, and then in the book of John, chapters 18 and 19. You'll find most of what we know about Pilate in those chapters. And he pops up a few other places with some occasional interactions, but the dialogue we're going to focus on comes from these chapters, and for the sake of time and lunch and all of that, we're not going to read all 5 of these chapters in their entirety this morning, but just so you know, if you're the homework type, there's your homework. Read these chapters. Pilate is a fascinating character. If you're into drama and thrilling and courtroom drama and Socratic dialogue, this is some of the highest level of Socratic dialogue in the scriptures, the conversations between Pilate, the Roman governor, and Jesus, the Jewish Messiah. It's great conversations to read. This story is presented in these 4 different books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they each kind of tell it from a different angle. They are 4 different guys telling the same story, but they have kind of 4 different audiences and 4 different angles from which they tell it. It's much kind of like, surfing news channels. I get excited when there's snow in the forecast. And by habit, I pull out the apps and I start checking all the different forecasts. Well, what does this weatherman say? What does this weatherman say, right? We start surfing the channels. What does Channel 4 say? What Channel 5 say? What Channel 7 say? What Channel 9 say? And they all will hit it from a different angle because they all have a little bit different audience. But it doesn't mean that the snowstorms are lies and fake and not real. Okay? There are some people that will tell you that this story is told 4 different ways by 4 different guys because it's a fake story. It's not. Open the door and look at the snowstorm, all right? Open the door and talk with Jesus. You will find out that these guys are all telling the truth, just from a different perspective. As we set the stage to meet this character, Pilate, I'm going to throw a map up on the screen. You'll see, I don't expect you to read all this tiny print. I just want you to see the colors, all right? You see in the bottom left, we got an orange section and a blue section. That's Judea and Samaria. And Pilate is the Roman governor over those 2 areas. And then we have the yellow section that's called Galilee and a green section called Perea. And those are ruled by a man named Herod Antipas, okay? Now here's a little bit of background on these 2 characters. First of all, Pilate, as we said, is a Roman. He's not Jewish. He works for Caesar, who's over everything, and he oversees this area of Judea and Samaria. Namely, this city called Jerusalem is right in the middle of his kingdom that he oversees, and Jesus is about to be on trial there in Jerusalem. So it's kind of Pilate's jurisdiction. However, Jesus came from the yellow, Nazareth, which is in Galilee. So there's some that think, well, maybe Herod Antipas should be prosecuting him. And there's a little bit of volleying back and forth. So Pilate is a Roman governor. He's Italian. I don't know. I don't know how Italian he is. It's kind of a goofy thought, but I always wonder, is he this guy that gets up there and he's, I wash my hands, I find no fault with this man, I'm innocent of his blood. And he's like, ciao, I don't know. Is he really Italian? I don't know. He's a Roman guy. As he speeds off on his Vespa. No, I don't know. Herod Antipas, on the other side, is Jewish. He likes to be called King Herod, though it's interesting, he's never actually had the title of king. They just called him that. His title was Herod the Tetrarch. Tetrarch means ruler of 1/4. Where a monarch would rule everything, a tetrarch just rules a quarter. Okay, so he's kind of like a governor. If you think of these as states, these are 2 opposing governors, and they do not get along. Now, Herod Antipas, I'm Don't quote me on the pronunciation of all these names. Antipas, it makes me think of antipasta, right? Right. Some of you might be thinking, we should get Italian for lunch now. He said that, right? Herod Antipas is one of many sons of Herod the Great, the first Herod that we learn about at Christmas time who tried to kill all the babies. He's one of his sons. He was a very greasy and immoral man who had an affair with his half-brother's wife, married her, and John the Baptist spoke out against this. You may remember this crazy story where he called out this immoral marriage of Herod Antipas and got himself jailed for it. Ultimately got his head served on a platter for it, literally. Don't want to go to the Italian restaurant now, I get it. But that's the story that's in your Bible. It's this guy. He had just murdered Jesus' cousin, okay? So we have Pilate, the Roman governor, Herod Antipas, the Jewish ruler of Galilee and Perea, and they are rivals, but they form a kind of unlikely tag team here in this story, as we will see in just a few minutes. But what I'm going to leave you with today are 8 observations about Pilate. He's our central figure, okay? Number 1. Pilate relied on secondhand information about Jesus. Pilate relied on secondhand information about Jesus. John chapter 18, verses 33 and 34 reads that Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" Remember the weather app? Is this just what the app said, or have you opened the door to see if it's actually raining outside? I want you to put yourself in his shoes, and maybe there's someone here who can relate to that. Whatever it is you know about Jesus, is it just something you've heard? Is it just, what my teacher told me? Is it just what I read on the internet? Is it just what they said on that documentary I saw that one time? Is it what they had on the Time magazine cover? What is it that you know about Jesus, and how is it that you know it? Do you know it because others have said it about him, or do you know it for yourself? Regardless of your opinions about Jesus, it's a fair question. Whatever it is you think of him, have you heard it, or do you actually know it? And I think most of us would have to admit we're a lot like Pilate. We've just kind of been told things about Jesus. And what happens in the case of this story is Pilate then will encounter Jesus, and he will find that the Jesus he encountered is nothing like the Jesus they had portrayed. Don't rely on secondhand information when it comes to Jesus. The invitation is there for you to encounter him yourself. Number 2, Pilate then questioned the truth of everything. Put another way, Pilate questioned the capital T truth, period. Classic move. Classic skeptic move. Well, you can't really know anything about anything, right? The old agnostic chess move, where they think they've got you because you can't really know anything about anything. Well, Pilate pulls that here in this passage in John chapter 18. Jesus says to him, "Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. To which Pilate replied, "What is truth?" What is truth? The classic pseudo-intellectual agnostic line. A rule that's never applied to anything in reality, but apparently only to Jesus, right? Because everything else is based on your knowledge. In fact, to say that you don't know anything about anything is a tell. Because by saying I don't know anything about anything is admitting that I know that I don't know anything about anything, which would be impossible if you can't know anything about anything, right? So this is the move that Pilate makes, and he presents this to Jesus. What is truth? But as he continues to encounter and observe Jesus, number 3, we find that Pilate was amazed by Jesus. Pilate was amazed by Jesus. Matthew chapter 27 picks up the story here. Then Pilate said to Jesus, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" But Jesus gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor, Pilate, was greatly amazed. The book of Mark also echoes this passage, that Pilate marveled and was amazed by Jesus. You see, the Jesus that he had encountered was not the Jesus they had portrayed. You ever meet a celebrity? Anybody ever met a celebrity? Yeah. Sometimes you meet them and they're like terrible people. And you're like, I thought he would be nice, and especially if it's like a Christian celebrity, you think they're gonna, and you find out, ugh. Or sometimes it's the other way, right? You meet somebody and you expect them to be not that nice, and you find out, wow, he's so down to earth and he's nothing like he's portrayed. Well, Pilate has a bit of this experience during this trial of Jesus, where he's heard all this stuff, but then he looks at Jesus and it says he's amazed. But amazed is not belief. Anybody can study Jesus and be amazed. In fact, the Bible says that Jesus would perform miracles and everybody was astounded and astonished. But there are still many that doubted and didn't believe. Being amazed doesn't equal saved, okay? Being amazed does not equal belief. Even atheists have a fascination with Jesus. Even atheists, dare I say, have an obsession with Jesus. He's amazing. A few months ago, I got to attend a concert of a Christian group. They're called Take Six, and they're very good singers. And it was not a Christian event. It was out in public, and it's not a lot of Christian people around, but they were just up there singing about Jesus, and they had a whole worship time, and there's a few hands in the crowd going up, like, oh, I guess that guy's a Christian, whatever. But I will tell you this, the whole crowd was amazed because they were that good. They were just astonished. And Pilate, the Bible says, was amazed by Jesus. First, he relied on secondhand information, and then he questioned the truth of everything. And then it tells us he was amazed. Number 4, Pilate and Herod Antipas then became unlikely friends. Political rivals from opposite sides who didn't have anything in common took an unexpected political turn. Look at Luke chapter 23. Luke 23:12. That very day, Herod and Pilate became friends, it says. Previously, they had been hostile toward each other. You see, they were volleying Jesus back and forth. Pilate's like, I don't want to deal with this. You deal with this. And Herod's like, I can't find any fault. You deal with it. And they're kind of throwing Jesus back and forth between the two of them. But in doing so, they both became friends, which I think is a very telling thing about the nature of Jesus. Number 1, how confused would their followers have been, right? People that followed Pilate and the people that followed Herod aren't supposed to be getting along. And these two guys are not supposed to be getting along. And now they're getting along. But the trial and execution of Jesus brought about this unholy agreement between them. Not a nice kumbaya sort of agreement. But this was the one thing they could agree on. This just shows us, I just want to insert this here, the fickleness and shallowness of the political class. Okay? I know we're in an election year, but this passage right here shows you the politicians don't have the answer. They don't. In fact, it was the trial and execution of Jesus that brought rival politicians together to agree on something. Now, in our country, we've got Republicans and Democrats and some other, and they don't agree on much. But when I read this, you know what it tells me? Both parties would have crucified Jesus. Both parties would have said, give us Barabbas. They don't agree on much, but they agreed on this one. The fact that Herod and Pilate would come together and be friends on this occasion. Number 5, Pilate tried repeatedly and found no fault in Jesus. He tried repeatedly and found no fault in Jesus. All the noise started to get quiet. He had heard all this stuff. They've accused him of all this stuff. But Pilate's like, the more I talk to him, the more I encounter him, none of this was true. This is not the Jesus you all told me about. John chapter 19, verse 7. Oh, I'm sorry. Nope. Back up. John chapter 19, verse 4. It says that Pilate went out again and said to them, see, I am bringing him out to you that you may know that I find no guilt in him. And so Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said to them, behold the man. You see, if he had taken their word for it, it would be a different scenario. Sometimes life, circumstances, even church can be kind of noisy. And we need to drown these things out and let them quiet down and just behold the man. Look at Jesus for yourself. You will find no fault in him. Number 6. Pilate was afraid that Jesus was right. Pilate was afraid that Jesus was right. John chapter 19, verse 7, the Jews answered him, we have a law, and according to that law he ought to die because he made himself the Son of God. The next verse, when Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. Pilate was afraid. What was he afraid of? What was he afraid of? I mean, maybe Jesus is just crazy. Some guy walking around, I'm the Son of God. That's not a crime. But why would Pilate be afraid of this? Pilate's the governor over all of Judea and Samaria, yet he's afraid of this lunatic, this liar. No reason to be afraid, unless he is the Son of God. No reason to be afraid of a man claiming to be the Son of God, unless that man actually is the Son of God. This is why Pilate was afraid. Remember, most people resist the gospel of Jesus, not because they believe it's false, but because they're afraid it's true. Pilate was afraid that we could really be messing up here, guys, if he's telling the truth. Number 7, Pilate understood that the decision was his to make. Pilate understood that the decision was his to make. John chapter 19 and verse 9, he entered his headquarters again and he said to Jesus, where are you from? But Jesus gave him no answer. Verse 10, so Pilate said to him, "You will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you?" He knew that the choice was his to make. The ball was in his court, literally. But Jesus answered him in verse 11, "You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you," that's Caiaphas he's referring to, "has the greater sin." So Pilate understood he had a choice. He could free Jesus. He could crucify Jesus. And he's proud of being able to have that choice. But Jesus says, actually, if it weren't for God up above, you wouldn't have even had that choice in the first place. There are times you and I get caught up on some of these semantic issues as it relates to faith. And for some, this is their resistance to the gospel. Is it a choice or not? Is it free will or is it predestined? Read this passage again. You have a choice to accept or reject Jesus. Yes. But you only have that choice because God gave you that choice. See that? It's only because of the sovereignty of God that you even have the choice to make. And Jesus points this out to Pilate in the midst of the trial. Finally, number 8. Pilate refused to face the truth. Pilate refused to face the truth. You see, leading up to this, they went through the trial. Pilate's wife had come to him and said, "Honey, I had a dream. You need to just stay out of this. Don't have anything to do with this man, Jesus." And so Pilate did. He washed his hands of it and he said, "I'm innocent of this man's blood." And he sent Jesus off to be crucified. Now, he wasn't done then. He oversaw the crucifixion. He oversaw the burial. He oversaw the tomb and everything else. But he tried to distance himself and wash his hands of the whole thing. But then we find that the very next day, Saturday, if you're counting days, Pilate refused to face the truth. Read Matthew 27, beginning in verse 62. It says, "The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate, and they said, 'Sir, we remember how that impostor, Jesus, said while he was still alive, after 3 days I will rise.' Continuing, 'Therefore, order the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people he is risen from the dead. And the last fraud will be worse than the first.'" The Jewish leaders come to Pilate and they say, "This Jesus is a liar, he's a deceiver, he's an imposter, and his followers are thieves and fraudsters. But just in case he comes back, as he said he would, can you please seal the tomb and guard it?" We have people that will tell you now, even today, that the Bible is fake and that pastors are thieves and fraudsters. And so they build up resistance and they seal their hearts just in case it's true. Look what Pilate does here in the last verse, Matthew 27, verses 65. Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers, go and make it as secure as you can." So they went and they made a tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting a guard. Pilate said he was innocent of this man's blood, but he knew he wasn't. He knew he wasn't innocent of this man's blood. Pilate was still afraid. Still afraid it might be true. I mean, he watched Jesus die. Watched him get buried. He oversaw the whole thing. He watched it. But just in case, we're going to seal it up and guard it. I wonder if maybe you relate to any of this. Maybe you've just accepted a Jesus through secondhand information or whatever he's been portrayed as. Maybe you've been a skeptic and doubted that you can know the truth of anything. Maybe you've looked at him, Jesus, and found him amazing. Maybe you've examined Jesus and you've also found no fault with him, but you do have a certain amount of social credibility you need to keep. Maybe you do realize that you have a decision that's in your hands to make. But even after all this, you've still sealed your heart shut. Just in case it's true. You see, people resist the gospel of Jesus, not because they believe it's false, but because they're afraid it's true. Jesus said to Pilate, "Everyone that is of the truth will hear my voice. Everyone that is of the truth will listen to my voice." Psalm 95 and verse 7 says that today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your heart. As Paul says, today is the day of salvation. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about next Sunday. God gave you today. And the decision is yours, and you wouldn't even have the choice to make if God himself had not orchestrated it and laid it in your lap today. I encourage you to encounter Jesus for yourself. Revelation chapter 3, we quoted it earlier, Revelation 3:20. He says, "Behold, I stand at the door and I knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come in and we'll talk." You can do all your research. Ask every Christian in this room. Did any of you regret it? Nope. If anything, they'll say, "I wish I did it sooner." I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I'm old enough. I've yet to meet a Christian that says, "I wish I didn't become a Christian until later in life." I've never heard that. It's always the other way around. If you need that kind of research, there you go. But if you're willing to open the door and encounter Jesus for yourself, he's ready. He's willing. This may feel a little different, a little strange, I don't know. But if you relate to this, and you do hear his voice today, don't harden your heart. If you say, "Pastor, I wasn't expecting this. I was just coming into church to check it out today. But I've been hiding out. I've been running. I've been dodging and bobbing and weaving. And I'm afraid God found me right here. Here I am." If that's you, and you want to throw your hand up and say, "I'm ready to have that talk with Jesus," I invite you just to do that. Just throw your hand up. We're not going to play the music. We're not going to dim the lights and have everybody bow their heads and do a little. No, we don't need to do that. But if that's you and you're ready to do that, we celebrate you today. And we welcome you home. Just know that if you open the door, he's going to come in. Heard a preacher joking about the Gospel of John this week. He said, the Word made flesh and dwelt among us and all that. It's a beautiful John chapter 1. And John chapter 2, he shows up at the wedding. Like, well, that wasn't what we were thinking. We like the idea of Jesus incarnate and coming and dwelling with us, but now he's coming to our parties? What? Yes, if you open the door, he will come in and he will engage with you. If you would like to make that decision today, I strongly encourage you to do so. Today's your day. God gave you today. There's not a lot of Christians out there that say, I found Jesus on Cinco de Mayo. But hey, it's pretty cool. But think about these things. We're just getting started. We're going to dig in deeper over the next 3 weeks for some more characters that are in the Bible that they were afraid it was true. So let me just encourage you to invite somebody. If you know somebody that might be struggling with some of these things, bring them to church with you next week. We'd love to see them. Love to have this conversation. But once again, go back and read these stories again. There's a little bit of Pilate in all of us. In all of us. I know I related to a lot of the things Pilate had to say. And I've been doing this a long time. I get it. Amen?